Sehui, what kind of name is that? Zen, are you lying to us? Enzo's voice was filled with doubt. I wouldn't blame him, for I seem to have a knack for unintentionally driving away any girl who has ever been interested in me. Her parents were immigrants from North Korea, and if you still think I'm lying, you can go to the Tilted Kilt pub. She works there. Not blaming him doesn't mean I wouldn't get irritated. I was tired of my friends teasing and making fun of me. They had nicknamed me Girl Repellent, which was super annoying. He said okay, but his expression still revealed that he didn't believe me. They all will change their minds when they see me with the most drop-dead gorgeous beauty they ever had. He deliberately changed the topic as he sensed my indignation. Enzo was one of those few people who didn't poke fun at me as much as others, and he was also someone I considered my friend. But it's days like today when he gets on my nerves, and I want to punch the shit out of him for not believing what I said. No, like I would do it, but I imagine it sometimes. About Sui, I met her a few days ago when I was walking past a park and saw her sitting under a tree wearing a Tilted Kilt uniform, possibly sniffling on her own. Despite looking irresistibly sexy, no one seemed to pay attention to her. I couldn't help asking what was wrong, and as I did, she looked at me in surprise as if she had seen a ghost. She told me she was kicked out of the apartment she rented, and since she hadn't gotten her pay yet, she had no place to go. I might have seemed a pervert, but I asked if she wanted to stay at my place since I had a few rooms to spare. I expected her to shoo me away or reject my offer, but she didn't. She asked me to hold her hand and lead the way. I was surprised when a girl didn't run away from me for once, making me feel a little nervous. Despite wanting to tell Enzo, I respected her request to keep her away with me a secret and refrained. After my brief visit to my friend, I returned home, and since she wasn't there, I went to the living room and turned the TV on. I was focused on watching the streaming movie Insidious, the last key when I heard a whisper inside my ears giving me a jump scare. "Ah, see, you scared me. I thought you were a ghost," I said as I held my hand over my chest. "And what if I am?" she said with a smile as she wrapped her arms around me. "Then you would be the prettiest one out there." I gave her a small peck before it became a long, steamy kiss. "Is something the matter?" She seemed distracted. I cupped her cheeks and looked into her eyes. "It's my old landlord. He's still harassing me. Even when I lived there, he used to do indecent things to me. I wish he would die or someone would kill him so I could be at peace." Resentment and despondency were lucid on her face, and I couldn't bear to see her like this. For some reason, I felt I could do anything to see a heartfelt smile on that beautiful face. "Don't worry, I'm sure someone will." I embraced her in my arms and tried to assure her while patting her head. At the moment, I felt her anger and hatred infusing me as my own. That night, as she lay beside me, I couldn't sleep, and a few scenes where she was getting beaten to death flashed through my mind, overwhelming my senses with the itch to pay them tenfold to every injury they inflicted on her. I checked the time, and it was 2 in the morning. Filled with anxiety, I spent the night twisting and turning in bed. Just when I started drifting to sleep, I was awoken by the doorbell. I turned to the side, and Suhi wasn't there. Thinking she might have already left for work, I opened the door. It was Enzo. I knew he was here to play that game I'd bought recently. After welcoming him in, I returned to my room to freshen up when I heard him laugh behind me. "You play with plushies?" I followed his gaze to the bed where a red plushie was lying where Sui had slept last night. "It's my girlfriend's. She might have left it here." I shrugged him off and dashed inside the bathroom. I didn't plan on going to work today, as I had something more meaningful in mind. The fleeting memory of hers I saw last night continued to play inside my mind. I handed the game to Enzo and asked him to play at his home as I had somewhere to be. Sometimes when you trust your eyes too much, you can't see the truth, and as a result, you end up doing irreversible damage. I experienced the same thing when I planned to destroy those who made the girl I love suffer. I don't know how, but I knew everything about them despite her never telling me any details. The owner was a vulgar drunkard pervert who often forced himself on her, and he had a son who rarely visited, but whenever he did, he would beat her and do the same thing his father did to her. The man owned a store, and his son had recently started working part-time with him after losing all his money to gambling. While putting up an act, I went there to do some shopping and moved to the area filled with oil containers. At first I thought of burning the place down with those monsters, but then I realized they had security cameras installed, so I waited for them to close the shop. The man headed home after closing it while his son received a call and headed off somewhere else. I wouldn't let this chance go to waste, so I followed him home. And as he was about to enter, I put my hand over his mouth and pushed him inside. I started thwacking him like I was possessed while he begged to know why I was doing this to him. Sui, she told me everything. Each word inflamed with aversion. I stared into his eyes, which made him tremble in fear. But it can't be. He started muttering those words while shaking like a leaf. I grabbed his throat and started choking him, not wanting to let him speak any further. But as his life was slipping out of his body, he released his final word, which made me retract my hands from his neck. He still died. But how? When I killed her with my hands. My eyes landed on the red plushie that appeared out of the blue on the front table when I heard the door clicking. Dad, you... I turned around horrified and saw the man's son standing with a pale face. Before he could run off, I grabbed the empty beer bottle from the side and aimed for his head. I had gone too far, and there was no way I would let him reveal I was the culprit. Plenty of empty bottles were laying around, so I didn't need to find anything else. I grabbed another bottle and broke it on his face before stabbing his neck with its broken half. I looked at the plushie on the table and uttered before exiting the apartment. Enzo was right. I never had a girlfriend.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
It happened 3 years ago when I got a call from my friend, Harry, one Sunday evening. He asked if I wanted to go with him to the new Tilted Kilt pub in the area. I had nothing better to do, so I said yes. I arrived around 8 and found him waiting with a few other guys. Everyone meet Simon. He is the guy I've been telling you about. Simon, these are my friends Carl, Fred, and Dan. I shook my hand with each of them as he introduced us. I had recently moved to this town about 2 months ago and was giving back-to-back interviews and still waiting for positive responses. Harry was someone whom I met through an online game and have been in contact with for more than a year now. Judging by our conversations, he seemed pretty decent, so it was no surprise that we got along well. And after moving here, we started hanging out with each other quite often. He always had some exciting place in mind and helped me interact with new people to make more friends. It wasn't like we were best friends, but I still enjoyed his fun-loving company. Anyway, as we were having fun with each other, I noticed him staring at a hot brunette server. I wouldn't blame him for that, since the girls working there were a feast for the eyes, and it was not just him who had their eyes on one of those girls. After spending 2 hours at that place, we returned to our apartments. The next day when I called Harry, he did not answer, so maybe he still had a hangover from last night. But when I received the same response every time I tried calling him, I thought he might be avoiding me for some reason. It was a different case, though, that I had yet to learn what it was. Anyway, I still hadn't heard from him for a few days. Then on Thursday evening, I went to the same pub I went to last time with him, but it was strange that I never once saw the brunette server in the 2 hours I spent there. I thought maybe she had an evening shift or something, so I decided to return at the same time we were here last, but I didn't find her even then. I asked the other servers about her and discovered she had skipped work since Monday. It was the same day when Harry stopped answering my call. I couldn't rest easy until my curiosity gets resolved, and since I knew a few places Harry could have been, I decided to check all of them out and ask if anyone might have seen him. But it turned out he hadn't visited any of the places he frequented in the past few days. Nor did his friends know about his whereabouts, since they were getting the response I did whenever they tried calling him. I remembered he had a fiancée, Brian, who used to spend a few days at his apartment occasionally, so I got her number from one of his friends and contacted her. "Why are you asking me about that jerk? He can die for all I care." The moment I told her about Harry, she yelled through the phone. Guess he must have done something to piss her off. So I asked, "Did he do something?" "Oh, so you're one of those friends who have no idea what he truly is?" I could tell the level of her anger by the way she was sounding. "Pardon?" I asked in confusion. That douchebag had been constantly cheating on me for a while now. He does nothing but fool around with girls, and I am done with him. So it would be better if you never call me again to talk about that dirt. I'm sure that must be some misunderstanding. All he did while with me was sing your praises. Ah, my goodness. Are you talking about some innocent love he had for me? Don't be a fool. He admitted being unfaithful to me several times, and each time I forgave him. He must be busy screwing some woman, so I advise you to stop worrying about him and mind your business. I couldn't believe my ears. What in the world was she talking about? I had never known this side of Harry she told me about, but then again, I only knew him for a year and a half, and how he looked at that server was not something a man with someone in his heart would do. After the call got disconnected, I decided to heed her advice and only focus on doing what I originally intended when I moved here. So, after applying for a few jobs online, I went to play some video games. The next day I got a call about my selection from one of the companies where I had previously given an interview and that I had to join from Monday. I decided to visit the pub that Saturday evening and have some drinks, and as I was doing that, I overheard someone talking about that brunette. She was found dead at her apartment after being missing for over a week. They spoke of her mysterious death and that her parents had filed a missing person report on her before her body was found. She was found wearing the same clothes that night, but according to the autopsy report, she died 2 days ago. I took the last sip of my ordered drink and went to the apartment. I was going to sleep my tiredness off for a fresh start at my new work. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the questions that crossed my mind. Was this just a simple coincidence, or was there something more to it? Was it true that Harry was a womanizer, and if it was, could it be that the server's disappearance and death had anything to do with him? There were multiple different assumptions and theories people were coming up with that were entirely different from mine. As Brian suggested, whatever the case was, it was none of my business.
A few months back, I went on a date with a guy who seemed familiar to me, but I couldn't put my finger on where I've seen him before. I assume I might have met him on a night out. It was a last-minute thing, and I told him how I wasn't looking for anything, but it would be nice to hang out. That was a mistake. When I first met him, he seemed like an alright guy, but things quickly turned when we got to a restaurant. He didn't order, but I did, and he started saying about loving my curves and my body. I laughed it off, but I thought he was being a bit too forward. He could have put it nicely or kept that to himself. While having my food, he began telling me about how I was different from other girls because they don't give nice guys like him a chance. Red flags immediately going off, so I came up with a story that I could only be out for a little bit because my parents wanted me to dog sit. He bought it, but then proceeded to stare at my breasts and saying how he wished that he could see me without clothes on, even saying I should send him a picture. I told him I don't do that, and he was making me uncomfortable. He stopped, but then told me how he brought me a gift. He pulled out of his bag a bouquet of roses, which I guess I did think was sweet, and a bag of Tesco prawns. That confused me, and I burst out laughing. I asked why he got them, and he said he knew I liked tempura and prawns. But the thing is, I never once told him I did, so alarm bells were going off again. My head told me to run, but I didn't want to be rude, so I stayed until the time I said I had to go. So I had less than an hour left. Okay, I can do that. He kept talking, but started to scare me because he started guessing aspects of my life. The school I went to, what I was like as a kid, and what I am currently doing. He got every part right. It scared me because I had not told him any of this and haven't posted anything online about it. So I backed away and asked how he knew all of that information. Turned out his mother was one of my teachers in school, and he asked her everything she knew about me and looked online for anything about me currently. I don't know when he asked her, but at this point, I wanted to get out of there. And thank God for my mom. Not long after, I got a text from my mom asking how things were. He didn't see the text, but saw it was my mom, and I just said, "Oh God, my mom and dad got the times wrong for the picture, so I have to go home now for my dog. I'm so sorry." The guy just accepted that and then started to walk me home. I said about only going halfway because I'm not comfortable with people knowing where I stay, but he then started insisting. He then dropped the bombshell that he knew that I stayed on X such and such road, but didn't know which house was mine. I told him that is really weird and that it creeped me out that he knew that. He claimed I told him, but I never tell people that. So I started to walk to the main road for my own safety, but he grabbed my hand and said he knew a shortcut. I told him I wasn't comfortable again, and he told me it was fine and basically dragged me to a quiet road. I was getting really scared when he stopped and shoved his tongue down my throat. I shoved him away and told him to stop it, and he apologized. That's when I noticed a stranger walking a dog coming, so I used that and said I needed to go and went to the main road. I thought it was safe, but no. The guy kept walking with me. I stopped and told him I wanted to part there and how it was nice to meet him again. He looked confused and said we have never met. He said about meeting on a night out just to get me to come. I then began saying, "Look, I have to go," when he cut me off, grabbed and pulled me near some bushes saying, "Before you go, there's one more thing." I told him I needed to go and to let go of me, but he ignored it. The guy then pulled me, hurting my wrists, and kissed me again. He saw the bushes and said about having privacy, and I managed to shove him off and tell him no. He then grabbed me again and tried to take me to the bush, saying, "It'll only be a second," while I resisted. Some dog walkers came by and he stopped and pulled me to kiss me again, this time grabbing my breast. I shoved him and screamed. I said no, and just ran. My heart was racing. I was terrified. I thought he might have tried to do something to me. I kept looking back and he was nowhere to be seen. I ended up taking the long way home just in case. When I got in, I just started to cry. I thought something bad would have happened to me when I got a message from another account. It was him. He said about how lovely it was meeting me and how it was the best date ever, how I was the prettiest girl he'd ever kissed and that he would see me again, adding how he hoped I had a lovely time and that he showed me he was a gentleman, then adding how he was on my road. I just hid on the floor for the rest of the day. When I looked at his profile, I remembered where I had seen him before. He used to message my old Facebook account years ago with weird messages and creepy edits saying how he loved me. This whole event happened within an hour and a half.
At around 5:15 a.m. on the morning of July 6, 1997, a Starbucks employee arrived at work to open up the Wisconsin Avenue Northwest branch of the world-famous coffee company. Situated just north of Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., there was a lot of work to be done before the morning rush, and the employee in question had yet to imbibe their morning espresso to really kick them into gear. So by their own admission, they were pretty groggy by the time they headed out back to one of the freezer units, intending to fetch some of the breakfast pastries that will go on sale that morning. But when the overtired staff member cracked open the freezer unit, inside was the frozen, lifeless corpse of 25-year-old night manager Mary Catherine Mahoney, along with the bodies of 18-year-olds Emery Allen Evans and Aaron David Goodrich. Although they weren't always on the safe shift pattern, the employees knew his slain coworkers well, and the horror of witnessing their frozen, discolored cadavers was almost too much to bear. They raced out of the Starbucks and flagged down a bus driver who was only just beginning his morning route, and given how they could have called 911 from the on-site telephone, running to find the comfort of another living person is very telling of this person's distraught state of mind. Within 5 minutes of the initial 911 call, police were on the scene and taking stock of the situation, All 3 employees had obviously been herded into the rear freezer units before being shot execution style. But what initially confused the investigation was that not a single cent was missing from the Starbucks. If the motivation wasn't robbery, then it looked a lot like a brutally well-executed targeted killing. But why on earth would someone ambush and murder 3 coffee shop employees during their routine night shift? What made the murders on the more shocking was that Georgetown had been traditionally a low-crime area of Washington, D.C., with local district council member Jack Evans saying to have a triple homicide anywhere in the District of Columbia is an unusual event. But to have a triple homicide in Georgetown is extraordinary, and this has never been a place where crime has been a problem. Over the course of that balmy July morning, scores of blue-uniformed officials made their way to the scene to look for evidence outside the split-level brown brick store. Homicide detectives and forensic technicians alike poured over the scene for hours on end after the bodies were found, working inside and outside the building adorned with the familiar green and black logo. They dusted doors for fingerprints, searched the store, and took statements from local residents in the hopes of piecing together what had happened. But it was only when Mary Mahoney, his car was examined, that further evidence was found. Evidence which indicated that the murderers were no random attack. Inside the car was spotless. Safer would look like signs that Mahoney had recently spent time playing with a pet, a dirty tennis ball, a plastic chew toy, a dog's brush, and a red cow. The only possible indication that something had gone awry was a flat tire on the front passenger side of the car, evidence that her attacker had made provisions to prevent her from fleeing. Mary was special. A mother later said she had an enormous heart. She probably would have compassion for the person who killed her. When she moved to Washington several years prior, Mary would jog alone an hour before daybreak, never worrying about being assaulted or attacked. She adored animals, particularly horses, and even took in Mary Lou, her sister Molly's toothless black and white alley cat. She attended various New York colleges before graduating with honors from Towson State University near Baltimore, and was a loyal and active Democrat, and turning for Bill Clinton when he was first elected. And according to her mother, it was a managerial job at Starbucks that really excited Mary. She had been employed by the company for 2 years and enjoyed being the manager. She was often seen sweeping the sidewalk in front of the store and obviously took pride in her store. What she didn't enjoy, though, was disciplining employees, particularly one that Mary had recently dismissed for allegedly stealing several $100s. She struggled with the issue before having to fire him. Her mother said, and for a long time, this became homicide detectives' main theory regarding the Starbucks shooting. Despite their hard work and determination, they came up short at every turn, eventually turning to the television law enforcement institution that is America's Most Wanted. After picking the case up, America's Most Wanted stated a thorough recreation of the murders and detailed many of the theories that the police were toying with. They also advised the number of an anonymous hotline, pleading with those with any information to come forward. And it seems this appeal struck a nerve with one member of the public, who called in with not only a frightening piece of information, but also a rather courageous proposal. In the hours following the broadcast of the Starbucks shootings, a woman called in America's Most Wanted hotline to inform them that she was dating a man who actually knew the shooter firsthand. This mystery person had confessed, even boasted of committing the murders, and on more than one occasion, the couple had initially taken the man's word in pure bluster. But after seeing the Starbucks shooting edition of America's Most Wanted, it became apparent that he might just be telling the truth. The woman then left her name and number so she could be contacted by DC police, and when they did so, she actually agreed to wear a wire for them in the hopes that she could catch a confession on tape. It was then that they learned their suspect's name, Carl D. Cooper. Cooper lived in Prince George's County near Baltimore City, and just on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. itself. He was the son of a church deacon who lived with his wife and son, but at the time, he lived anything but the wholesome life of a family guy. At the time of the Starbucks shooting, Cooper was being charged with attempted murder in the 1996 shooting of an off-duty police officer in Prince George County. As far as family's complicity in his crimes, it turned out that it was Cooper's wife that purchased the 9mm handgun that her husband used to shoot the officer. It was the combination of this and his alleged involvement in the Starbucks shooting that led DC police to wiretap Cooper's home phone. He was arrested after making reference to several local shootings, but insisted that a friend of his named Keith Covington had joined him in the Starbucks robbery, and was him that executed the 3 victims. However, when they caught up with Covington, they discovered he had been recovering from a gunshot wound at the time of the murder, meaning it was highly unlikely that he was ever present on the scene, let alone the ones who have done the shooting. "If I killed them, I'd say I killed them," he reportedly said. "But that's not me. I'm not saying I'm a saint, but I'm not going to go out and just kill people. You gotta be a dummy or a psycho to do something like that. Is pure evil." When confronted with the evidence of his lies, Cooper admitted to lying about his so-called friend's involvement because he killed 3 people and was afraid to go to jail. In the process of trying to avoid the death penalty, Cooper told the investigators he was sticking out the Starbucks for about a month, confirming that he acted alone and fired 2 guns, the .38 caliber snub-nose revolver and a .38 caliber pistol. Cooperating heavily due to the ever-looming threat of the death penalty, Cooper confessed to shooting the manager Mary Mahoney when she refused to give him the keys to the safe, which held over $10,000 in cash. When she said no, Cooper shot a warning shot into the ceiling, which sent a terrified Mahoney running into the employee hall. Cooper pursued, caught her, and wrestled with Mahoney over her keys. But when her resistance looked like it would be too much to overcome, they shot her dead. He then shot the 2 other Starbucks workers at the store, executing one as they survived the attack and attempting to crawl to safety. Cooper later stated that he wanted to put him out of his pain and misery, but it's more than likely this thinly veiled attempt at showing her to conscience was nothing but an attempt to dodge the first death penalty charge in over 30 years. During his trial, even when the relatives of the victim wept openly in court, Cooper remained chillingly composed. He also admitted to murdering 39-year-old security guard named Sandy Griffin during a botched robbery. Cooper had helped Griffin at gunpoint during demanding that the security guard hand over their expensive .40 caliber handgun. But then, fearing Griffin would assault him in the process to defend himself, the serial murderer executed the security guard before quickly fleeing the scene. Cooper admitted to then selling the pistol on the street for $300. Once Cooper was convicted of the Starbucks murders and sentenced to life in prison, Griffin's relatives were no doubt pleased that their loved one's killer had been put away. But they expressed frustrations that it had taken 3 more murders, maybe even more, before the killer had been caught. To them, a lack of urgency in the DC police force had cost 3 young people their lives and raised many questions regarding their competence and command. If the account of his defense attorney is to be believed, Cooper is nothing more than a career criminal whose shaky temperament and unbridled greed caused him to take the lives of the innocent. But time and time again, Cooper had the opportunity to simply take the money and walk away. If he chose not to, he chose to kill people he just didn't need to kill, and he did this on more than one occasion. The first time might have been down to a simple rush of blood to the head, and to genuine possibility that killing the security guard was not part of Cooper's plans. But there's also a possibility that killing him proved to be something of a thrill. The thrill that Cooper wanted to replicate, and executing the 3 Starbucks workers. There's no doubt that locking up killers like Carl Cooper for the rest of their lives makes the world a safer place. The only worry is that there are many more out there just like him. People who've escaped justice for horrific crimes are those who have the same darkness in them, just waiting to boil over.